Why?
Yes.
That's sort of a, I don't know if you'd call it a stupid question or a, I don't know exactly the word I'm looking for. But anyway, everybody was joining back in them days, right? It's just a form of patriotism, that's all. You know, I would have joined right after Pearl Harbor, but I was too young. So consequently, I had to wait till I turned 17.
Now, why did you join the Marine Corps?
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because I always thought that was a pretty good outfit, you know, and as I don't know, growing up and being raised on a farm, I just was full of vim and vigor, and I figured that was a pretty good outfit to be in, a rugged outfit and disciplined and all kinds of good stuff. So I don't know, I might have even seen a movie or something with Shores of Tripoli or something or other, you know, give me a little hoorah, you know. So anyway, that's why I ended up joining the Marine Corps. I didn't want to go in the Navy. I loved airplanes, you know. My brother and I, we could always be eating. You could plane would go over and say, oh, there's a Stinson or a Ryan or Beechcraft or whatever. But I went up to enlist with a friend of mine, Boltworthy, they call him. They call him Bull because he could pick this building up, you know. He wanted to go in the submarine service. I says, man, you're out of your skull. I says, a submarine? I says, if you're in an airplane, you got to come down. If you're in a ship, well, 50-50 chance you're floating around, you know. In the Army, you're on land all the time anyway. I says, in the submarine, there's nothing in this God-given world that says it's got to come up. If anything, it goes further down. I said, you're out of your mind, Buster. I said, no, 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 no. So I went up to Hartford. I think the post office they had a recruiting place. So I go in there to enlist in the Marine Corps.
Do you recall your first days of service?
Pardon?
Do you recall your first days of service, what it was like when you first joined, first put the uniform?
Well, before that, after I enlisted in Hartford, they sent me to Springfield, Massachusetts to have my physical. Well, and then they had what? I don't know if it was, I don't even know if it was a day to go back home and get ready and head for Paris Island. And, you know, some guys, you know, I knew and everything. Oh, geez, they drafted me, you know, and I'll be going in 15 days or a month or something. I said, what are you complaining about? I said, man, I just about got time to grab a couple things, and I says, I got to go catch a train to go to Paris Island. Never mind no few days. So anyway, I think there was 6 of us from New England. And we stopped in New York to pick up, I think his name was Ben Calder. Anyway, I don't remember actually the trader I ate. All I know is when we got to South Carolina, is Port Royal and Yemassee and whatever. Man, it felt like that railroad tracks. It felt like it. It felt like it was on springs or something. I don't know if the train was going to go down into the swamp or what, but it was pretty enlightening, you know. And
so what was Paris Island like for boot camp?
Lord have mercy. I think we got off a train somewhere, and I think we got on a bus for the last few miles to go to, from what I can recall. I'm pretty sure that's the way it went. We got to Paris Island. We got off the bus. Lord have mercy. You seen some of these guys. You know, I had nice wavy auburn hair then, you know, and you seen these guys with It looks like it was about a half an inch long, and everybody's saying, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry." And I said, "Oh, what's this all about?" And this drill instructor comes up. Of course, you don't really want me to use the language that these guys were using because, boy, you talk about profanity. Man, it almost made your hair stand on end. Anyway, we fell in, and I don't know, it seems like they marched us. Seems like the first thing they marched us to was the barber shop. They had guys, nowadays some of them got long hair, but some guys had some pretty good crops of hair back then. Sat down, and that guy with them barber shears, it seemed like he just moved his wrist a couple times. Yeah, 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 yeah. And all of a sudden you were shorn like a sheep, being led to the slaughter. And oh boy, that was really, and from there I think we went to get dungarees. The Marine Corps dungarees. Boy, they were good. They wore like iron. I wore a couple pair I had, it seemed like, for about 3.5 years, and I wore them after I come home, and oh God, you couldn't wear them out. But anyway, and then we went to get shoes. And when you stood on some kind of a platform or rack or something, you had to pick up so many pounds in each hand. And I'm saying, what on earth is this for? Well, I guess they figured when you picked up so much weight, it spread your feet out or whatever. So consequently, that's how they gave you your boondockers, they used to call them, field shoes. And if you had a rifle and a full pack and all that, if that's the same principle as picking up them weights. It, govern your width and length of your feet accordingly. And from that point on, we had these wooden barracks. Man, you could see daylight through them, And you were assigned to bunks, and you had a locker and everything. And the drill instructor, I remember his name was Crawford, and we had a platoon sergeant. He was an old China Marine, and boy, I'm telling you, this guy, he was like, click his heels like my grandfather used to in French, Joseph Imperial Dragoons. Well, anyway, I think almost everybody in the platoon, including the drill instructor and the platoon sergeant, I think we're all rebels. And us being 6 New Englanders, you can imagine how that went over. Damn Yankees, they were still fighting the Civil War, Well, anyway.
So how did you get through the training?
How did it get through? With the grace of God and a little bit of ingenuity and help and whatever. Anyway, like I said, I was born and raised on a farm. And, that obstacle course and everything was like a joke to me because, we used to plow and pitch hay and saw wood and chop wood, and I think the year of the hurricane, I don't know, it was devastation through all the woods and everything. Well, I used to always love to hunt. I'd run through the woods like a deer over these trees and under them and through them. And to me, like I said, this obstacle course business, it was like a joke. And some of these poor guys from the cities and everything, boy, it was hell on earth for them guys. Well, it wasn't too easy for us, but, as far as the physical part of it, it was no big deal.
Now the shooting came easy for you?
Pardon?
The shooting came easy for you? when you were shooting the weapons?
What about it?
Did it come easy for you since you had shot before?
Oh yeah, man. Hell, it was like, nothing. But that was, I think that was the final week or so of the basic training. I think we only had 8 weeks of training at that time because they were rushing guys through, And of course, you had to familiarize yourself with all the different weapons, but as far as the shooting part of it, I mean, it just came natural, like, you know what I mean? And one thing I could never figure out, you could be the most expert rifleman in the world, left-handed, right? And you had to shoot right-handed. Now, to me, I said, it just didn't make much sense. But later on through life, I stopped and figured, well, back in them days, they were shooting with .03s, Springfield .03s. Well, that was a bolt action operated, right hand. And if you were trying to shoot left-handed, it's sort of difficult to reach up, and work the bolt with the left hand. So I could see the logic to them making you shoot right-handed, right? Which, when you stop thinking about it, made sense. But we had to qualify with, I think, 200 yards, 300 yards, and 500 yards. And then they had a kneeling position, I don't know, I think they call it a squatting position. You had to sort of sit, your right leg go out from under you, and you had to sit on there, the inside of your ankle, and I'm saying, man, this don't make much sense. If you're in combat, what are you going to do? Say, hey, wait a minute, let me get in position so I can shoot here, It just, it didn't make any sense to me, I could see prone position, I could see offhand. But as far as the sitting and kneeling, kneeling possibly, but, to me, if you were ever in combat, you don't need all these fancy positions because the enemy's not going to say, okay, I'll wait for a minute till you get in that position, right? It just never made sense. But a lot of things never made sense because, to me, especially in the Marine Corps, it was like digging one hole to fill another one up. You know what I mean? They got you so geared up and aggravated, and well, man, you didn't care what happened. You know what I'm saying? It just, well, they knew what they were doing. You know what I'm saying? They psychologically, and
Now, after boot camp, did you go directly over to the war?
No. Oh boy, that boot camp! I could tell you a lot of nice things about that boot camp. Boy, it was really, really something. It's a story in itself. And my platoon, it seemed like everybody in the platoon, whatever they wanted or requested, they gave you something entirely different. Okay, well, I wanted to go in a machine gun company, right? So lo and behold, they sent me to Cherry Point in the Marine Air Wing. I said, oh, Lord have mercy, what on earth are they doing, And this one kid, his name was Wilbur Walter Way, and he wanted to be a gung-ho Marine and to be in a line outfit, a machine gun outfit or something. I think they put him in Cooks and Bakers or Field Music or something. Oh, he was broken-hearted, man. He was behind the barracks. He was even crying. He wanted to, he come from Maine. He wanted to, he reminded me of that buckwheat, alfalfa, I think it was, in our gang. He looked just like him, and I think we called him Buckwheat. And he wanted to be a big, nice line company Marine, but they sent him like I said, either in cooks and bakers or field music or something, but basically it made no difference in one sense, because in the Marine Corps, everyone was basically 100% rifleman. If you needed replacements anywhere, they could call from any branch, you know what I'm saying? Because theoretically you were 100% rifleman. And I don't know how it is nowadays, but that's the way it was then. So, yeah, I think the 1st of May or something, I went to Cherry Point, Marine Air Wing. Oh, brother, this got to be something. Well, like I said previously, I loved airplanes, you know, and I would have loved to have been a pilot. And I think I had 140 IQ at the time. I could have gone to OCS had I completed high school, because back then all you needed was a high school education. And I quit high school when I was a sophomore. And matter of fact, I just got my diploma here 5 or 6 years ago. Connecticut passed a law that anybody went into service out of high school, they automatically got to give them a diploma. But anyway, I was assigned, I think at first we were waiting, they were forming this VMD 354 Marine Photographic Squadron. And they were bringing guys in from El Centro and Miramar and Eagle Mountain Lake, Texas, and all over to form this VMD 354. Well, myself and a few other guys were there before the squad. We were like the nucleus of the squadron before it was even formed, because we were there right off the bat. And I think because the Scott Squadron wasn't commissioned until I think the 1st of July. So this was May and June. I think I was in a ground defense unit at the time, before the squadron was formed, commissioned or whatever. And like I said, they were bringing guys in from all parts of the country, you know, going into the ND 354. And I was flying as a belly gunner on them PB-4Ys. We were doing like coastal patrol and everything. And I forget how long it was we had them, and the Navy took the PB-4Ys away from us and gave us an F-6F squadron and sent us to Greenville, North Carolina. Yeah. I forget exactly the date. But we were there in Greenville, and I was in ordnance at the time. And we were doing aircraft arming, you know, the F-6S and everything, and arming bombs, and we did all the necessary work that, you know, fell into the category of aircraft armorers. And they sent myself, a fellow named Claude Wilson, and a guy named Mooseberger, 3 of us Marines, to some Swabie base in Norman, Oklahoma. It seemed like there was 20,000 Swabies there, and we were the only 3 Marines. And to this day, right now to this day, I don't know why I was there. But I had it pretty good, because the Navy chief says one day, sitting in a classroom, and Navy chief said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I don't have the slightest idea." So they had a big hangar there, and they had a thing up on top. They call it the crow's nest. It was a big more or less the upper deck in a way, and we were reclaiming guns from all the planes that went down now in San Diego and all that area, you know, and we were cleaning all them 50 caliber barrels, and me being very ingenious, I whittled out a whole bunch of wooden plugs and tapped them in all them gun barrels, and then filled them up with this, I forget what this bore cleaner was, but boy, I'll tell you, I never see anything like it, and I don't, even since. He poured that in there, let it sit there for a day or so, took the wooden plug out, flushed all them stuff out, ran the rods through. Them barrels looked just like they come from Colts. They thought we were gods. Man, we had this Navy chief come in from Oklahoma City. He used to bring bags of whole wheat donuts and all kinds of good stuff. Because, boy, we saved them guys lots and lots and lots of work. And like I say, they thought we were gods for a while. So, then, when we did come back to Greenville, somebody said, Zukowski's first sergeant wants to see you. Okay. He went there, hands me an envelope, opens it up. Advanced infantry training, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Oh, brother. The best of two worlds. From the air wing into the mudsloggers. I don't know how as long as that Camp Lejeune, but I think we fired everything that they made that could kill. The M1, the O3s, the M1 carbine, the BAR, the Thompson submachine gun, the Rising submachine gun. Must have been something else in there somewhere. Flamethrowers, grenades, grenade launchers, satchel packs, everything you could kill with. Everything. I mean, everything that they had. We, quote, more or less mastered it because I had an assault squad. Very interesting, very, very enlightening, very entertaining to say the least. But when we were on Paris Island, got to backtrack here. The very next platoon that we were in, the very next platoon, they had drafted guys. You know, when they draft them back in the state, they would draft 50 guys, you, every other one they would pick out. You know, you're going in the Navy. Oh, we don't want to go in the Navy. Get out. You know, you're in the Marines. Oh, we don't want to go in the Marines. Get out. Well, these guys in that next platoon were draftees. And you could hear them once in a while. Well, we didn't ask to come in here. Oh, and that platoon sergeant would click his heels like a Gestapo agent. And you could see he'd almost salivate. You could, his face, his contours would completely change. And he would come up in front of you and he'd click his heels and he had that swagger stick and he'd almost drive it through that soft spot in your shoulder, boy, and you better not twinge or flinch or bat an eye or something, and he would say, you bastards asked to come in here. We didn't ask you and you're going to regret it. Oh, and I'd say under my breath, oh, Lord, please make them guys shut up. Man, I think he could hear him for half a mile away. The minute he heard that, he would come up stiff as a ramrod, and like I said, he would almost go out of his mind. You bastards asked to come in here. We didn't ask you, and you're going to regret it. And boy, I'm saying, Yeah, I think I'm regretting it already. But that was some of the good parts of it.
So how long were you there before you went overseas?
Oh, then I went to Camp Pendleton. I forget how long I was at Camp Pendleton.
And do you remember how you
I know one duty we had. Some poor kid got lost in the mountains or something, and they called out a whole detachment of Marines to go, they're practically holding hands, scouring them hills and valleys looking for that kid.
Now, how did you get from stateside to overseas?
How what?
How did you get from stateside to overseas?
From where?
From the U.S. to overseas. How did you what transportation method did they use?
Geez, I can't even remember the boat we went over on. Boat, ship, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, I think we landed in Oahu, not too far from Waikiki Beach. Boy, them little native kids, they were terrific. You could throw a couple pennies overboard, man, and they would follow that thing down till it disappeared, and they would get it. Boy, you talk about excellent swimmers. We were at I think Camp Catlin was the name of the camp we were at for a while. I don't remember even how long. And then we got on this, they call it a pineapple scow or something. We went from Oahu to Maui, the beautiful island of Maui. That was a 4th Division staging area. Boy, if you only knew then what you know now, you could have bought the whole island for next to nothing. And that is the island now, I guess, they say.
So did you go on?
They had a tropical rainforest on one part of the island, not too far from where we were. It rained every day of the week. In one part of the island, that rained for 14 years. You step down, it's like stepping in a talcum powder. It's just crazy, absolutely insane.
Did you go to another island after that?
Trying to get some dates here. How old's his fifth fleet? What the hell fleet were we tied up with? I don't know, it seemed like we were floating around. I don't know if we touched on Guam, Saipan.
So what was it like for you when you first got to Iwo Jima?
I forget exactly how many days we were floating around there, and man, I think all the battle wagons and heavy cruisers pounding that island and dive bombers dive bombing, and man, unbelievable, and scared. Somebody says, you ask somebody if they were scared and they say no, you could tell them in those certain terms, guess what? I don't believe there is anyone alive that wasn't scared. Anyway, I turned. I think I turned 19 on the 18th of February. And the 19th, under a hell of a naval bombardment, we got in a landing craft and headed for the beach. And when we hit the beach, I said, this ought to be a pushover, man. Hardly anything to, to slow us down or stop us. I guess old General Kurobayashi was waiting for the whole division practically to get on shore before they started. Oh man, they hit mortars and artillery and oh God, everything that there was on that island, I think they threw at us. And boy, they were racking up a good score because a lot of good Marines never got past the beach, I guess. And there was that volcanic ash. It took a step forward and went two backwards. It's just, like the saying goes, pretty tough sledding with no snow. So finally, when we were able to get off the beach into the ground, more or less, heavy ground, and you talk about hell here on earth, I guess that you could pretty well define that. We had a Marine General, H.M. Smith. H.M. They called him Howlin' Mad Smith. He says, well, takes every man in the Marine Corps. Damn near did, I guess. It was real eerie at night, boy, I tell you. Sometimes you'd hear somebody, hey, Joe, is that you? Yeah, what's the password? Hello. Oh. You use passwords like Jello or hello or words that the Japs couldn't pronounce. I mean, they couldn't pronounce the L's, like it was hero or Jero. So the minute you got it, they knew the password, but they couldn't say it very well. So that's when they lob a few grenades over. Once in a while, they'd fire a star shell or sort of eliminate. Boy, I tell you, you just didn't know. You didn't know if there's more or less like a trap door, one of the tunnels would come up right next to you or something, and of course you could have a half a dozen Japs pouring out of it or more. Constant bombardment. Artillery shells, mortar shells, and it's a wonder they didn't blow the island out of the water.
Were there a lot of casualties?
Casualties, Jesus, I think altogether the total casualties, I think is 28,861. I forget how many actually, never made it off the island. A lot of dead, thousands wounded, man. Unbelievable. It's hard to describe. When somebody says it stood at the gates of hell, boy, I'll tell you, Ty. A lot of good buddies never made it. I think it was, what do you call it? I don't know, 25th or 26th or something like that when they got hit.
So what was a typical day like for you there?
It was, what do you call it? Like I said, you had to watch every stupid movement. You had to watch. You weren't sure sometime who was next to you or behind you. Maybe you got a few more feet further than you wanted to. I think one time, the coordinates was, that's the radio man would, give out some kind of coordinates and everything. Then they called for an airstrike. The FRUs come off the carriers. Well, the last coordinates they got was whatever it was, I forget just now. Well, maybe it picked up a couple 100 yards in the meantime. Well, when these FRUs come down the strafe, they were strafing everything past this coordinates. Well, there was a lot of casualties with friendly fire there. But one of the misfortunes of war, so you didn't know, what the hell are they shooting at us for.
Now, what did you do to cope with the stress?
Prayed a lot, for one thing. Thought about home and what in the hell on earth am I doing here? Why did I enlist in the Marine Corps? But I'm sure I wasn't alone. I'm sure there were a lot, and the irony of it is, all these guys were 18, 19, 20-year-olds. You might as well say kids. Right? Some of them never left, got out of their own backyard at home, Christ, they didn't know from one town to the next practically. It's just hard to put it into words sometimes, you don't know just where to start or how to tell it, how someone can even begin to. I don't think people could begin to visualize it all. And boy, that island, I don't think there was a spot on that island that wasn't honeycombed with tunnels. And Kuribayachi, he knew what he was doing. He was there for quite a while, boy, and he had them guys digging them tunnels to hell and back. The whole object, I guess, of taking Iwo was supposed to be to get the airstrips that were there, because, when they started bombing Japan proper with B-29s, and some of them got shot up pretty bad, and they probably couldn't make it back to Tinian, and a lot of them, crash landed on Iwo. A lot of them didn't know if they'd have enough fuel to get back to Tinian. And plus, the P-41s, I guess, could fly air support all the way to Japan. So, how do you weigh it out? How do you put it on a scale? How do you say how many lives it saved? How many lives are lost saving these lives? You know what I mean? Where the hell does the balance come in?
Were you able to stay in touch with your family?
Well, I don't know what you're saying by staying in touch. My mother wrote as much as she could. You try to write as much as you could. It's just one of them things. You tried to do what you could. You tried to do your best. What the hell else could you do, I think that's the name of the game with anybody. You know, you do what you can, the best you can. How else can you analyze it, right? Oh God, I don't know, Ty. What else you want to know?
Were you guys able to entertain yourselves at all during your downtime, if such a thing could be had?
What downtime?
Any practical jokes that you played?
Christ, then that night, they had, what do you call it? I don't know if it was a friggin' missile or what it was. Here comes Charlie. You could hear that thing screaming along. You didn't know where the hell it was going to impact, whether it was going to be right in your foxhole or 10 feet away or 100 feet. There was some resentment of some of the guys with me because the corporal rate I got when I was in the air wing, and you're still stuck all through my advanced infantry training and everything else, because apparently they figured, you know, I was up for sergeant 3 different times in the air wing and in the line outfit. But every time, supposedly, they froze the rate, so that's as far as I got.
Now, what did you think of the officers and the other Marines?
Well, like anything, a lot of them were 90-day wonders, and a lot of them were good line company officers. And then again, you know, if some lieutenant, platoon leader got knocked off, wounded or something, hell, a platoon sergeant, a sergeant could command the company, you know. I think if it boiled down to bare 100% necessity, I probably could have to one degree, you know what I mean? Knowing all the protocol and procedures and everything else that goes along with it. But fortunately, I didn't have to get called upon for something like that.
Now, did you keep a journal or a diary while you were there?
Hell no. Up here as much as I could. I don't know, maybe some guys could or did or had time or didn't have time or took time. I don't know what the hell you'd say. I guess, you know, well, you know, what you know, maybe you had a pad or something. Some guys kept stuff in their helmet or pictures of the girls, the wives, the kids. Tough sledding with no snow.
Now, did you get any medals or citations while you were there for your service there?
Well, the Alpha got a presidential unit citation. Purple Hearts, what the hell, they gave them out like they did lollipops, you know.
Now, do you remember when your service came to an end?
When it came to an end?
Jim?
Yeah, we went back to Maui. with a short visit to the hospital and the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. That was nice. Then back to Maui, and I don't know if they disbanded the 4th then or later. Where the hell did it go from there? I don't know if it left right from Maui to take the boat home. We went back to Oahu, and from there we went home. Seems like in my mind, we went back to Maui. I mean back to Oahu. And I had a picture, and I don't remember the name of the damn ship we even went back home on. Went to Treasure Island, went under the Golden Gate Bridge, and landed on Treasure Island. Oh, God. They had a big riot at Alcatraz. They called all the Marines out. Every other one. You. Some guys had been overseas 2 or 3 years. Never got wounded. They went to Alcatraz, got shot. And I think, what do you call it? I didn't get discharged there. I think they sent me to Great Lakes. Great Lakes Naval Station. I think that's where I got discharged, in Great Lakes Naval Station. But there's a lot of nice little interesting things. Like when we were at boot camp and we were at Greenville, all nice little tidbits they could throw in there, about some guy slapping a sand flea and this platoon sergeant went out of his mind, you murderer, boy, he used a lot of nice language also. He made the guy dig. Like you got to bury an individual, how big a grave site is. He made him dig a grave site that big to bury that sand flea. And then when we were at Greenville, we used to run into Greenville at the USO there. This Mom Savage ran it. She's a beautiful woman, Matter of fact, I left the green garrison cap there. I said, I'll be back after the war to pick it up. I never did go back after it. They were hard to come by. Of course, I had hearts for some little dolly there in Greenville, but that's a story in itself.
So what did you do in your time after service?
After service?
Yes.
After service, I came back to Willimantic. Naturally, you had to report to the draft board. Naturally, when you were 18, you had to, sign up for the draft. So I went there and I go to the draft office. The girl starts questioning me. How old are you? I says, I think I'm going to be 20 pretty quick. Well, you're supposed to register for a draft when you're 18. I said, well, sorry about that. Well, it's a federal law, and on and on. I says, hey. And she went and called up big pudgy old guy come out there, you know, and me being a cocky Marine and everything, I was really giving him a hard time. Don't you know, up one side and down the other, you're supposed to report to the draft board as soon as you're 18, and where were you this time? I said, geez, I don't know. I says, I think when I was 18, I was out in the South Pacific somewhere. Guy got all red and he sort of slid under the counter almost and told the girl to take care of him. So, you know, me, like I said, being an ornery Marine of sorts. And then I think you could sign up what they call a 52-20 club. 52 being the weeks in the year, and the 20 was $20. You could get $20 a week for 52 weeks. I think I collected about 3 weeks or so. Then I went to work for Willimantic Housing Authority, I think it was. Gene Lewis was the head of it. We were going down to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, taking down Quonset huts and putting them up. Used to be the poor farm right at the junction of Route 6 and 32, and Willimantic there, the VFW's there, and Stop and Shop and everything else now, but we built a little village out of Quonset huts there. That was done, so then I went to work for Jarvis, who was building a bridge on Route 31 in Coventry. The hurricane took it out in 38. So they closed the job down in November, I think, because it got too cold. So then I went to work for White Oak Construction. It was all called the Wilbur Cross Highway, you know, all the way up the Massachusetts line. Marcelli, Gamino, Frion, 7, S&M, White Oak, all had a 4-mile stretch. And everybody was closed down for the winter except White Oak. And we're buried in the ledge up the Gouldy and back, up around Towlin Marsh. Matter of fact, there's still a bulldozer down the bottom of Towlin Marsh there that these two brothers owned the bulldozer. And, you know, they worked for White Oak, but every time it snowed, you wouldn't see them because they'd go out, make one pass through a driveway, $20. You know, they made more money. You know, and Chris, I'd leave Willimantic, I'd have a woolen zipper jacket on, I'd get up there and be freezing. I'd have to build fires under the wagon drills and bulldozers to get them started. And it's so cold, and I'm saying, what the hell am I doing here? I said, I come back from Pacific, my blood is thin, and I'm out here freezing. I went back to work in a thread mill.
So how did your service experiences affect your life?
How did it affect your life? That's a good question, because to me, it seemed like, I don't know, back during World War II, it seemed like once in a while some guy had shell shock or war neurosis or what the hell ever you want to call it. But most everybody just slid right back into where they come from like nothing ever happened.
And did you join any veterans associations?
I think I joined the VFW Willimantic right after I come home. I think it was 1724 Gold Star Post. I think is one of the biggest posts in Connecticut. They had way over 2,000 guys, members in it. That's why they call it Gold Star Post. But all the veterans organizations, Legion, and VFW, the AMVETS, they're all, I don't know, it seems like none of the younger generation seems like they want to carry on these for some reason. Or a lot of them are just falling by the wayside, I guess.
Do you ever attend any reunions?
Pardon?
Do you ever go to any reunions?
Yeah, quite a few. But That's another thing, you know. Nowadays, a lot of them guys are sick. A lot of them are going home to meet the Lord, and I don't know. It's just a whole different world out there now. It seems like you wonder what the hell you're fighting for to begin with sometimes. But I don't know. I guess maybe that's the way life goes or something.
Is there anything that you want to tell me about that we haven't covered?
Well, I could go back and jump back and forth, playing checkers, hopping all over the place, but I don't know. What do you want to know?
That's enough for me.
Hmm?
That's enough for me. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for your service. And thank you for letting me talk to you today.
Yeah, it seemed like the last year or so, you know, I think seemed like a big wave of patriotism has built up, maybe even after 9/11, you know. It's, thank the veterans and all this. I know I was going to my cardiologist once in Retreat Avenue in Hartford, and this young lad, about, say, in his 40s, dressed in a business suit, you know, I had a hat on. I don't know if it's over here or something. And he says, "Sir, I want to thank you." And I said, "What the hell? What did I do? What do you want to thank me for?" He said, "I want to thank you for doing what you did and being in the service and all that." And I said, "Jesus Christ, I almost had a lump in my throat." I said, "That's the first guy that thanked me in 50 years, you know." I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anybody owes you anything or obligated in any way, but it just seems like, you know, for what all the guys did, they, to me, deserve a little bit more recognition than they have gotten down through the years. But it's like anything, you know. People forget a lot of things too easily, you know. And the poor guys in Vietnam, oh, I feel sorry for them guys. They really took a beating, you know what I mean? They were shunned and sworn at and spit on and everything else. They didn't deserve that in any shape, size, form, or manner. They did what they were supposed to be doing. I had a restaurant a lot of years. This guy used to come in, the big red one, the big red one, the big red one, on and on and on and on. Big red one this, big red one that, big red one North Africa, never no Marines, blah, 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 on and on and on. My temperament isn't always a nice, young, pleasant individual, you know, and I got sick of listening to him one thing. I says, "Can I ask you something, you big son of a bitch?" My wife is like, got dead still in the place, and there was quite a few people in there. I says, "How the hell did you get to North Africa?" He says, "What do you mean?" I says, "How did you get over there?" He said, "Well, the Navy took us." I said, "Really?" Jesus, I thought you swam. And everybody's chuckling, you know. I says, "You know what?" I says, "You know who won the war? The Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, Merchant Marines, the people back home." I says, "Be proud of the outfit you were in. I don't care what it was. Be proud of the outfit you were in. But don't think you won the war by yourself. The war was won by a combined joint effort. And if you want to be intelligent and dig around a little while, you'll find there were Marines in the North African invasion, because every battleship and heavy cruiser had Marine contingents on board." Well, I says, like I told you, "You know what you did?" "What do you mean?" I said, "You know what you did? Exactly what you were told, like everybody else. A non-common officer told you something, you didn't say, 'Oh, go to hell, you do it.' You'd be rattling the cage for a while. You did exactly what you were told. Like I said, be proud of the outfit you were in, but don't think you won the war by yourself. It's that simple. End of quotation.